Crittenden was wanted on a federal warrant after investigators learned he traveled on a one-way ticket to L.A. several days after the shooting. A police report shows Crittenden told investigators he'd been robbed at gunpoint in Atlanta.
In life, there are truths so brutal that we think they only exist in the most sensational Hollywood scripts. The villain hides behind the mask of a hero, a symbol of hope, only to be ultimately exposed by irrefutable evidence. But, ladies and gentlemen, reality is sometimes more chilling than any movie we've ever seen. The mugshot photograph, the cold, impersonal police report, is the most shocking moment. It needs no dialogue, no special effects. It tears apart the mask of glory, stripping away the elegant suits to reveal the true face of the crime. What do you see behind those lenses? No longer the gods worshipped by millions, but the vacant stares and haggard faces of those who have lost their humanity because of their recklessness. In this collection of documents, we will confront 35 mugshots of black celebrities that Hollywood history has always sought to conceal. When the film's story becomes a real-life nightmare and the villain is someone the community once placed its complete trust in, we are forced to ask ourselves, how thin is the line between ultimate glory and the abyss of sin? Is fame a reward, or is it actually a cruel curse for souls that have lost their peace? Imagine a sun-drenched afternoon at the St. Louis Cardinals Stadium in the early 1980s, where Robert Rozier, a towering figure with a massive physique, was dominating the NFL field. Rozier was the embodiment of the American dream: power, fame, and a future brimming with dollars. But no one could have predicted that, when the stadium lights went out, this man would step into a deep darkness that even the most horrific scenarios wouldn't dare depict. The mugshot we see here isn't of a fallen star, down on his luck with alcohol or gambling. It's a portrait of a serial killer fueled by extremist beliefs and hateful prophecies. After being dropped from the team for poor performance and lax discipline, Rozier didn't seek manual labor or coaching. He drifted to Miami, where the heat and poverty gripped the predominantly black neighborhoods. Here he met Hulan Mitchell Jr., who called himself Yahweh ben Yahweh and the leader of the Nation of Yahweh cult. Rozier didn't just join for faith. He joined to become Butcher. In the cult's world, he was placed in a group of assassins called Angels of Death. His mission was specific and ruthless: go out into the streets and kill any white person he encountered to prove himself a loyal child. In 1986, Rozier confessed to something unimaginable. He had personally stabbed 7 strangers to death on the streets of Miami. He didn't use a gun from a distance. He used the physical strength of a professional athlete to overpower and finish off his victims at close range. The stark truth was that he killed them simply to advance in the cult. When the police raided the place, instead of maintaining the integrity of a martyr, this giant immediately knelt and confessed everything about his leader to save his life. He betrayed the cult, accepted a 10-year prison sentence, and was then secretly released by the government under the Gia name Robert Ramesses to protect him from retaliation. Throughout the 1990s, he lived clandestinely in California under a false identity, believing his past as a serial killer was buried forever under the layers of witness protection paperwork. He worked, shopped, and lived like any other citizen, but deceit seemed to be deeply ingrained in his nature and would never change. In 1999, Robert Rozier was arrested at a store on charges of writing a fraudulent check for only about $200 to defraud the store. When the police took his fingerprints at the station, the computer showed a red warning. The true identity of the giant who forged checks is none other than Robert Rozier, the serial killer from over a decade ago. In California, there's an extremely strict law called the 3 Strikes Law. Because Rozier had a history of extremely serious serial murders in Florida, even a minor offense like forging checks was enough to trigger a life sentence. The last mugshot photograph of him, with graying hair and a sagging face, shows him standing before the court for the last time. Robert Rozier is still imprisoned within the stone walls of Mule Creek Prison in California, where he will surely breathe his last in solitude. The cruel irony is that it wasn't the 7 souls he brutally murdered years ago who drove him to his death, but that paltry $200 check that dragged this killer out of the shadows and forced him to pay for a lifetime of crimes. In the 1980s and 90s, Mel Hall was famous not only for his talent on the field, but also for his lavish lifestyle and the beautiful young girlfriends who accompanied him on every game tour. The harsh truth was that Hall wasn't a charming gentleman. He was a ruthless sexual predator. While the public celebrated his achievements at Yankee Stadium, Hall used his fame and money to seduce, manipulate, and abuse teenage girls, some as young as 12. Most outrageously, this happened openly in front of his teammates, coaches, and the media at the time. Yet everyone chose to remain silent to protect the team's asset. This mugshot was taken in 2009 when the ghosts of the past finally caught up with Mel Hall. Gone are the expensive baseball uniforms and the flashing lights of sports reporters. Instead, we see the cold, sterile lights of a Texas police station. Hall's face in the photo still bears the arrogance of someone who believed he was above the law, but reality has dealt a harsh blow to that self-confidence. After decades of concealing his crimes under the guise of a baseball star, Hall was convicted of aggravated child sexual abuse, a crime considered the most heinous in America. The Texas justice system showed no mercy to the man who ruined the lives of innocent children. Mel Hall received a 45-year prison sentence, a term equivalent to spending the rest of his life behind bars. Now, at 66, instead of enjoying his retirement in glory and wealth, Hall is languishing in a Texas prison where the fame of an MLB superstar is worth nothing more than a prison sentence. According to his correctional records, he wouldn't be eligible for parole until 2031 at the earliest, but given public outrage and the severity of his crimes, the door to freedom seems permanently closed. Mel Hall's story is a stark reminder of the decay of the sports hero's culture and proof that, no matter how famous or wealthy you are, crimes against children will eventually be brought to light.
Have we ever stopped to wonder if the very glory we bestow upon them becomes a veil for a sinister soul?
The photo you're seeing here is the face of Javaris Cortez Crittenton, a man who should have been enjoying the glory of a professional basketball star instead of bowing before the cameras of Atlanta police. On that fateful night of August 19, 2011, in Atlanta, the atmosphere was thick with cold hatred instead of the joy of victory, because just months earlier, Crittenton had been robbed of his $55,000 necklace and watch, a price too high for the pride of a Mansfield gangster Crips member masquerading as a professional athlete. Instead of calling the police, he chose to grab his assault rifle, climb into his black SUV, and dash into the night to hunt down those he believed had dared to touch his belongings. In that moment of chaos, he fired wildly from the car window, but the bullet struck Julian Jones, a 22-year-old mother of 4, who happened to be walking on the sidewalk at the exact moment his outburst of rage began.
Atlanta 911, emergency operator 44.
Send the police to make them drive. Well, they had a drive-by.
You said you know who did the shooting?
Yeah, the basketball player, Crittenton, Crittenton.
The illustrious career of the former Lakers guard ended with the sound of handcuffs, and this criminal record photo captures the moment his arrogance completely crumbled, giving way to the stunned look of someone who realized he had officially become a murderer. The real drama unfolded when the FBI officially got involved, turning Crittenton into a nationwide manhunt with a widely issued national arrest warrant. While the entire nation was frantically searching for him, he secretly booked a one-way flight from Los Angeles back to Atlanta to escape. But federal agents were waiting at John Wayne Airport to apprehend him just as he was about to board the plane on August 29, 2011. This wanted poster appeared in newspapers everywhere, exposing the face of a murderer instead of the sports idol millions admired. In 2015, to avoid a life sentence, Crittenden pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and received a 23-year prison sentence. A controversial turning point occurred in 2023 when he was released early after serving 10 years thanks to changes in Georgia's sentencing rules. Now, in 2026, at age 38, Javaris Cortez Crittenden lives as a ghost of the past under strict probation and supervision. He had to spend thousands of hours recounting his mistake to the children of Atlanta, trying to atone for Julian Jones's death and reminding himself that an impulsive gunshot had destroyed not just one life, but a brilliant future he once held in his grasp. The image you see is that of Michael Andrew Jace, who once embodied everything we expected of a successful black man in Hollywood: dignified, masculine, and possessing an air of absolute trustworthiness. Throughout the 7 seasons of the hit crime series, The Shield, he not only played Officer Julian Lowe, but also became an icon of unwavering moral values, a hero maintaining order amidst the chaos of Los Angeles. With his imposing height and resolute eyes, Jace was a source of pride for the community, a testament to the ability of a man to rise from adversity and don the uniform of honor and integrity. However, the truth often has sharp, raw edges that no film lens can obscure. Behind the closed doors of the Hyde Park mansion, the so-called justice was merely a decaying facade, rotting away under the pressure of debt and morbid jealousy. On the night of May 19, 2014, Michael Andrew Jace wrote a horrific ending that no cold-blooded screenwriter would dare dream of. In an uncontrollable rage, the man once trusted by the entire nation shot and killed his wife, April Jace, in their living room, their family home. The brutality of the crime lay not only in the gunshot, but in the way he tortured his wife in front of their 2 young sons, aged 5 and 8. He aimed at April's legs first, a cruel act of physical and mental torture, accompanied by the cold-blooded challenge: "You like to run, don't you? Then run," before coldly ending her life with subsequent shots. The mugshot you see now is no longer the heroic police officer everyone knows. It's Michael Andrew Jace with a vacant stare, a man dead from the inside the moment he pulled the trigger. In 2026, at age 63, Jace is enduring solitude behind bars, serving a sentence of 40 years to life, a painful reminder that even the brightest glory cannot conceal a soul possessed by evil. Charles Stanley Dutton stepped onto the dazzling Broadway stage with the air of a learned scholar, a self-respecting black man who commanded Hollywood's admiration with his prestigious Yale drama degree. In the hearts of our generation, those who lived through the turbulent 1990s, he was not only the star of the Rock series and the blockbuster Alien 3, but also a brilliant symbol of willpower and intellectual prowess. He was seen as a noble artistic soul, an exemplary character who shattered all prejudices to reach the most extravagant heights of acting. But behind that elegant suit and resolute face lay a past written in blood and the cold steel of the dark streets of East Baltimore. In 1967, amidst the suffocating atmosphere of racial segregation and poverty, the 17-year-old boy nicknamed Rock became embroiled in a life-or-death struggle. The man who fell under Dutton's blade was a 26-year-old black man, a fellow impoverished vagrant wandering the streets like himself. There was no high status or wealth. It was simply a clash between 2 souls abandoned in a society where a glance or a challenge was enough to ignite a tragedy. Dutton took the man's life in a fit of rage, an act of violence that immediately sealed his future with a 5-year manslaughter sentence in Maryland State Prison. It seemed that after paying his debt to justice, his life would turn a new page, but the curse of the streets continued to haunt him. Just as he was finally free, Dutton was apprehended and sentenced to another 3 years for possession of a deadly weapon. The height of his arrogance was when he led a bloody riot within the prison, making himself one of the most dangerous figures behind bars. 12 years of his youth were spent in shackles, where the line between human and savage was as thin as a hair. The turning point in his life truly emerged in the terrifying silence of his solitary confinement cell, where the boundary between madness and sanity became clearer than ever. In that thick darkness, Dutton stumbled upon a tattered old script and realized he could use his rage, the inner strength of a murderer, to embody other lives in the hallowed halls of art. He transformed his 12 years of imprisonment into a painful soul cleansing, determined to shed the dust of the streets and reach Yale, and then the pinnacle of glory. Charles Stanley Dutton is a powerful testament that even when descended into hell, humanity can still find redemption if it has the courage to confront itself. Lawrence Taylor's 2010 mugshot officially marked the moment a legend's illustrious 13-year career completely collapsed. The gaunt face of the man born in 1959, with his eyes completely empty under the cold flashlights of the police station, revealed the harsh truth of a dark night at a Rockland County hotel. There, Taylor was caught in the act of soliciting sex from a homeless girl for $300. This crime transformed the greatest defensive player in NFL history into a despicable predator. Targeting a homeless girl in dire straits created a horrific shockwave across America. To avoid a lengthy prison sentence, Taylor made a calculated plea deal to lessen the severity of his actions. Ultimately, he received only 6 years of probation instead of the decades behind bars he had initially planned. However, the price paid for physical freedom was a life sentence for the honor of a legend. The most devastating consequence was that he was forced to register on the sex offender registry for life. That mugshot will forever be proof that even the greatest icon can be led astray by the devil and fall into the inhuman, depraved hell. Felicia "Snoop" Pearson emerged from the dark corners of Baltimore to become a rare black diamond of the HBO empire through the television masterpiece, The Wire. With her instinctive acting and breathtakingly cold demeanor, she was once praised by the legendary Stephen King as the most terrifying female villain in television history. In the eyes of critics and the public, Pearson embodies a miraculous rebirth, a soul that bravely shook off the mud to reach the most brilliant peaks of world cinema. But the chilling authenticity she brings to the screen is actually distilled from the breath of a bloody and cold past. In 1994, amidst the fiery violence and drug-fueled chaos of Baltimore, 14-year-old Felicia Pearson chose a gun over a pen. In a brutal street confrontation, when conflict reached its peak of rage, Pearson did not hesitate. She pulled out a gun and fired the fatal shot, instantly taking the life of young Okia Toomer. It wasn't a random incident, but the result of a killer instinct honed in the impoverished alleyways and a lack of education, transforming a child into a second-degree murderer in an instant. That 14-year-old trigger sealed her fate with 2 consecutive 8-year prison sentences at the Maryland Women's Correctional Facility. Even after reforming and becoming a global star, the shadow of the streets continued to haunt Pearson like a curse. In 2011, at the height of her fame, she was arrested again in a large-scale drug bust called Operation Many Faces. The harsh truth revealed that the allure of crime and the temptations of the past were so deeply ingrained that even the glamour of Hollywood couldn't completely erase them. By 2026, at age 46, Pearson stands there as a living witness to the struggle between guilt and the yearning for redemption. Will the allure of fame be enough to heal a soul forever burdened by the gunpowder of his wandering days, or will it merely be a veil concealing a pain that never fades?
Have you ever wondered if the person beside you, the one you trust most, might secretly be a monster?
Antron Singleton, known professionally as Big Lurch, was once a dazzling phenomenon in Texas rap. In the early 2000s, he was a symbol of success, a glamorous artist on the verge of immense wealth in Los Angeles. With his brilliant mind and sharp rhyming skills, Big Lurch was expected to become a new king of horrorcore music. Fans saw in him a golden future, a fulfilling life that anyone would envy in the glitzy capital. However, the journey to uncover the truth about Singleton leads us to a dark and suffocating reality. Behind the multi-million-dollar contracts was a soul consumed by the allure of drugs. One night in 2002, the velvet curtain of fame was completely torn away. Singleton was no longer an artist. He let his bestial nature surge in an uncontrollable frenzy. In his gloomy apartment, he brutally attacked his roommate, Tanisha Isais, with a savagery beyond all limits of humanity. The stark truth was revealed when police found Singleton wandering naked in the streets, covered in blood and screaming demonic sounds. At the crime scene, forensic reports uncovered a heinous crime. Singleton not only murdered his victim, but he also dismembered her and ate part of her lung while she was still warm. This wasn't the content of a horror song. This was the moment a human being completely transformed into a bloodthirsty beast. This barbaric act of cannibalism immediately sealed his life sentence, with no possibility of parole. By 2026, at age 50, the man once expected to dominate the music charts would be rotting away in the absolute solitude of a California state prison. The glory of Big Lurch is forever buried in the pool of blood from a bestial act, leaving a dark scar that will never fade in the history of modern music. Amidst the blood and fragments of fame, we are forced to confront a painful truth. Was the demon lurking behind that talent already there, or did we unwittingly nurture it with blind praise? Let's slowly look through the radiant glow of the past to sadly realize that the smile that was once the pride of an entire generation was merely a mask concealing a shattered soul, when a pure heart inadvertently traded its crown for dark, hopeless dreams. Maya Campbell entered the public's heart through the sitcom In the House as a symbol of hope and ideal beauty. Alongside the legendary LL Cool J, she shone as Tiffany Warren, a young woman possessing intelligence and vibrant energy. For the Black community at the time, Maya was more than just an actress. She was pride, a role model of a princess flourishing brilliantly in the glamorous Hollywood film industry. People saw in her a golden future, a path paved with roses that any family would wish their daughter could reach. But when the spotlight fades, Maya embarks on a solitary journey into her own darkness, where the devastating effects of bipolar disorder begin to tear apart reality. Things spiral out of control as the shadows of her mental illness combine with the destructive power of drugs, plunging her into a vicious cycle of brutal confrontations with the law. The chaotic screams in the streets of Atlanta or California are, in fact, the cries for help from a mind consumed by manic episodes, and the reckless, honor-losing acts of theft on the streets are the desperate attempts of a homeless person seeking anything to buy a moment of false peace from drugs. Her police record grows thicker with each misstep, transforming an A-list star into a frequent offender. The world was shocked when the raw footage of a dilapidated Maya Campbell, toothless, her eyes once captivating millions, now vacant and vacant, begging for pennies to buy drugs, was exposed under the cruel gaze of social media. Gone was the glamorous Tiffany Warren. All that remained was a soul stripped of its dignity, imprisoned in the cruel cycle of short sentences and tearful rehabilitation programs. Richard Walters, better known worldwide by his stage name Slick Rick, left a profound mark on music history with his unmistakable style, his signature blindfold and heavy gold chains. Known affectionately as the Ruler, this rap legend was at the heart of the golden age of hip-hop. In the eyes of the public in the 1980s, this British-born star was the embodiment of transcendence, a masterful storyteller who transformed street rhymes into classic hits played repeatedly in bustling nightclubs. However, the glittering aura of his expensive jewelry was overshadowed by the deafening sound of gunfire on a fateful night in 1990. The relationship between the renowned hip-hop artist and his cousin and bodyguard, Mark Plummer, turned into a bloody criminal drama when blackmail and threats from his closest confidant pushed Richard Walters' patience to the limit. Instead of seeking legal help, the man at the height of his fame chose to take matters into his own hands. In the middle of a busy street, he shot Plummer, inadvertently injuring an innocent bystander. A tense police chase ensued, ending with the musical storyteller apprehended and imprisoned at the height of his career. A sentence of 3.5 to 10 years in prison for attempted murder was just the beginning of a decades-long legal tragedy for the errant artist. After serving his sentence in 1996, freedom seemed to smile upon Richard Walters, but another specter emerged: strict immigration policies. Having never officially obtained U.S. citizenship, the British artist found himself in an endless battle with the Immigration Service, INS. The days that followed were no longer filled with dazzling performances, but with long years of uncertainty and imprisonment, facing deportation from what he had considered his second home. It wasn't until 2008, after numerous interventions from authorities and the community, that this man, who had endured so much hardship, received a full pardon. In the quiet solitude of the present, perhaps what torments this veteran artist most is not the stone walls of the prison, but the exorbitant price of suspicion that forever stole the most brilliant years of his youth. A storyteller through music, demonstrating that even those with the most masterful ability to manipulate words sometimes cannot write a peaceful ending to their own lives. Have you ever wondered how a hand that once controlled a multi-million-dollar music empire ended up behind the wheel of a death trap, crushing his own past and future in a fit of blind rage? Marion Hugh Knight Jr., or the powerful nickname Shug, was once both a terror and a symbol of the powerful rise from impoverished Compton. The Death Row Records mogul didn't just build a record label, he erected a fortress of steel where legends like Tupac Shakur and Dr. Dre shone under his violent protection. With his imposing stature and ever-present watchful gaze, the most powerful man on the West Coast at one time dominated the music industry with an ironclad law of the jungle, where the line between art and crime was as thin as a musical note. However, the journey to uncover the truth about this fallen giant leads us to a bloody afternoon in 2015 on the set of Straight Outta Compton. At what should have been a celebration of a golden age, a trivial argument triggered the ruthless instincts of the driver. In an uncontrollable rage, he slammed on the gas pedal of his massive pickup truck, coldly crushing the bodies of two men as if they were mere inanimate obstacles. Terry Carter perished under the wheels of his guilty former friend, transforming a chance encounter into a shocking murder scene, exposing the emptiness behind the glamorous facade of a legend. That brutality put an end to the freedom of the music tyrant. After a 28-year sentence for manslaughter, the image of the national prisoner in his faded orange uniform completely replaced the luxury cars and glittering gold chains. As of January 2026, at age 60, Marion Knight will still be quietly wallowing in solitude at the Richard J. Donovan Rehabilitation Center in California. With her earliest parole date not until October 2034, the imprisoned man will have many more years to look back on his fallen kingdom through prison bars. Before being escorted to his cell, the man who once commanded Hollywood's respect left behind a belated, bitter regret about his career and the price he paid. Terry was my friend, and the price I paid is that this evil soul will never find peace. In the chilling silence of a Philadelphia morning in 1996, a car lay idling, not to take a star to a dazzling performance, but to carry lost souls into the abyss of an irreparable crime. Warren McGlone, whom all of Philly once revered under the stage name Steady B, was a solid icon of the golden age of hip-hop. He and his partner, Cool C, had woven captivating rhymes, delivering music as authentic and gritty as the very breath of the streets. At the time, this rhyme master was a symbol of pride, a representative of the young black generation yearning to assert themselves through talent and intellect rather than violence. But then desperation pushed the gifted artist into a life-or-death gamble where the price to pay was not just his fame. Behind the wheel of the getaway car parked in front of the PNC Bank, the miserable accomplice sat silently in that fateful moment, listening to his frantic heartbeat amidst the gray smoke of the city. When the deafening gunshot ripped through the bank, he had no idea that the bullet would not only take the life of Laretha Baird, a city police officer, but also shatter all hope of his own freedom. The law didn't require him to be the one to pull the trigger. Charged with second-degree murder in a felony, the former rap star faced the harshest sentence: life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. The prison doors closed, forever separating him from the spotlight, leaving behind a musical legacy slowly being obscured by the ashes of his crime. No song, no poem can wash away the truth that he was there in the fateful car that took a mother, a police officer, to the other side of the world. Entering the beginning of 2026, at age 57, Warren McGlone is still quietly enduring endless days in a Pennsylvania prison. In the cramped and gloomy space of his cell, the driver of that fateful day may still hear the engine starting that morning, a sound that marked the beginning of a death sentence for the soul. In the chilling silence of a Philadelphia morning in 1996, a car lay idling. Not to take a star to a dazzling performance, but to carry lost souls into the abyss of an irreparable crime. Warren McGlone, whom all of Philly once revered under the stage name Steady B, was a solid icon of the golden age of hip-hop. He and his partner Cool C had woven captivating rhymes, delivering music as authentic and gritty as the very breath of the streets. At the time, this rhyme master was a symbol of pride, a representative of the young black generation yearning to assert themselves through talent and intellect rather than violence. But then, desperation pushed the gifted artist into a life-or-death gamble where the price to pay was not just his fame. Behind the wheel of the getaway car parked in front of the PNC Bank, the miserable accomplice sat silently in that fateful moment, listening to his frantic heartbeat amidst the gray smoke of the city. When the deafening gunshot ripped through the bank, he had no idea that the bullet would not only take the life of Laretha Baird, a city police officer, but also shatter all hope of his own freedom. The law didn't require him to be the one to pull the trigger. Charged with second-degree murder in a felony, the former rap star faced the harshest sentence: life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. The prison doors closed, forever separating him from the spotlight, leaving behind a musical legacy slowly being obscured by the ashes of his crime. No song, no poem can wash away the truth that he was there, in the fateful car that took a mother, a police officer, to the other side of the world. Entering the beginning of 2026, at age 57, Warren McGlone is still quietly enduring endless days in a Pennsylvania prison. In the cramped and gloomy space of his cell, the driver of that fateful day may still hear the engine starting that morning, a sound that marked the beginning of a death sentence for the soul.
Is there any fate crueler than shining on the red carpet while your soul is chained to a bloody secret?
Let's step back a little to gaze at the innocent face of the boy who shook the hip-hop scene in the 90s, and then sadly realize how quickly the harsh world of adulthood can devour a young soul. Chiali Griffith entered the spotlight as a teenager, carrying the immense expectations of the renowned Native Tongues group. With his hit, "Age Ain't Nothin' But a Hashtag," the golden boy of rap proved that talent knows no age, transforming himself into a vibrant symbol of confidence and style. Audiences at the time held a special affection for this talented young artist, as he represented a promising new generation, a darling of New York, striding down a golden path to fame. Ironically, the song title, "Age Doesn't Matter," became a cruel curse as the once talented child artist entered adulthood with uncontrollable rage. The harsh truth about him was revealed on a fateful day in 2000 in the Bronx. Amidst the thick atmosphere of hatred from a family dispute, the reason of this man with a broken soul completely surrendered to his most ruthless instincts. Because of petty conflicts and financial debts with Sean Raymond, his girlfriend's brother, he coldly pulled out a gun. The deafening shots not only pierced the victim's flesh, but also shattered the future of the man who pulled the trigger. Sean Raymond fell, his blood staining the streets, while the perpetrator immediately turned his back, beginning a breathtaking cross-state escape, transforming himself from a musical idol into a ghost lurking in the shadows. The most painful blow to public trust came when the face that once dominated the music charts was suddenly framed on a nationwide wanted list. The entire United States was shocked to see the fugitive artist listed among America's most wanted criminals. For a year, the fallen star lived as an outcast, hiding from all eyes in utter fear until justice finally came to him in 2001. A 14-year sentence for first-degree manslaughter marked the end of his music career, forcing the misguided man to sacrifice his vibrant youth behind cold prison walls to atone for a life lost. After 12 long years of paying the price in the darkness of prison, the misguided traveler was finally released in 2012. In Sacramento, California, in the early 1990s, the name X-Rated emerged as a haunting phenomenon in the gangsta rap genre. Oneri Brown, the young man behind that stage name, possessed a sharp mind and a lyrical ability that astonished fans. However, few suspected that the very verses that propelled him to fame would become the fatal blow that ended his freedom. The brutal truth about Oneri Brown was revealed on a fateful night in 1992. In a brutal gang-related raid in Sacramento, the target wasn't street thugs, but the home of an innocent woman, Patricia Harris. Amidst the chaos of gunfire and violence, Harris perished in a terrifying nightmare in her own home. The case initially stalled due to a lack of clues, until prosecutors stumbled upon X-Rated's Psychoactive album. In a scene straight out of a thriller, the very record he had just released became the most compelling witness exposing his crimes. In the silent darkness of the courtroom, as the harsh melodies of Still Shooting echoed, the atmosphere thickened with the sounds of hell, where Oneri Brown coldly uttered confessions wrapped in a cruel beat. "I'm still shooting, blasting your damn head off / leaving a few spent cartridges from my Glock. Then I disappear into the fog. I have to get away before those damn police arrive." The terror that gripped the courtroom stemmed not only from the bloodthirsty lyrics, but from the grim reality as prosecutors peeled back layers of metaphor to reveal a perfect murder plot. From the method of entry to the type of weapon mentioned in the lyrics, everything mercilessly matches the scene of Patricia Harris's murder. Sentenced to 31 years to life for first-degree murder, Oneri Brown entered prison with a promising future. But the tragedy continued with a profound irony as he transformed prison into a secluded recording studio. For 26 long years, this misguided artist persistently recorded rap verses via closely monitored phone calls, releasing dark and chillingly realistic music from the shadows of prison. In later statements, sitting under the studio lights of the popular interview show No Jumper, with a face etched with the marks of 26 long years behind bars, the rapper candidly admitted his guilt with a voice hoarse with bitterness. "I sit here, breathing the air of freedom, but my heart is still trapped in that winter night. It was my fault, a debt of human lives that I could never repay, even if I spent the rest of my life kneeling in reverence." In the cradle of jazz and blues in New Orleans in the late 1990s, the No Limit Records empire rose like a magnificent castle, gilding the dreams of Mississippi River children and transforming Corey Miller into a prince striding down the red carpet of fame with the world at his feet. Known by his menacing stage name, C-Murder, the younger brother of music mogul Master P possessed everything a star could desire. Chart-topping hits, expensive suits, and a bright future filled with adoration. However, that dazzling brilliance was forever tainted on a bloody night in 2002 at a Louisiana nightclub. Amidst the thick smoke and frenzied music, a brawl erupted, resulting in the tragic shooting that claimed the life of Steve Thomas, a teenager barely 16 years old. In an instant, the stage name C-Murder ceased to be a symbol of street style and became a stark indictment, transforming the Prince of No Limit into a murderer condemned by the entire United States. A child's life lay lost on a cold floor, bringing about the downfall of a musical icon at the height of his power. Corey Miller's case became one of the most convoluted and controversial in American legal history, with witnesses changing their testimony and prosecutions alleging wrongdoing. After years of legal struggle, in 2009, he was sentenced to life imprisonment by a 10-2 jury, a cruel legal loophole in Louisiana at the time. From glamorous red carpets, Corey was thrust directly into the infamous Angola State Prison, once a slave plantation with fields of grueling forced labor. Despite receiving legal support from powerful figures like Kim Kardashian, hopes of regaining her freedom were always dashed by the weight of the life sentence. In the vibrant world of hi-fi music, Andre Dow, aka Mac Minister, emerged not only as an artist, but also as a powerful figure, a man teetering on the fine line between the spotlight and the law of the streets. However, the real tragedy began when the soul of the Bay Area, the legendary Mac Dre, was assassinated in Kansas City in 2004. In the shadow of his loss, Mac Minister chose to become a pastor of revenge rather than salvation. In 2005, amidst the dazzling lights and artificial frenzy of the Sin City of Las Vegas, a deadly trap was set. Mac Minister was accused of using his fame and promises of a better life to lure two young Kansas City rappers, suspected of involvement in Mac Dre's death, to a fateful meeting. They entered Vegas dreaming of glory, but what awaited them was the cold barrel of an AK-47 in a deserted alley. The deafening gunshots didn't end a song, but sealed two lives in a brutal revenge plot, a true bloodbath in Sin City.
I don't know who killed Fat Tone. How did they end up murdered in your girlfriend's car?
I don't have no answer for that.
The Mac Minister case is a thrilling chapter in court history, where evidence of a staged execution was brought to light. In 2008, the court convicted him of first-degree murder and sentenced him to 2 life sentences without parole. A cruel verdict closed the door on the life of the Bay Area artist, plunging him into the eternal darkness of prison walls. Even today, he continues to plead his innocence from behind bars, but the AK-47 shell casings and the ghost of hatred remain silent witnesses, overshadowing any justification. In the 1970s, Thomas Henderson embodied the unbeatable American dream in the Dallas Cowboys colors, America's team. Under the glittering silver star and the weight of the Super Bowl ring, the giant strode proudly to the pinnacle of glory, where money and adoration seemed inextricably linked to his image. His journey from the glamorous pitch to the cramped prison cell lasted only 28 months. But it was enough time for Thomas Henderson to look deep into the abyss of his own making. After serving his sentence, he emerged empty-handed, but with an iron will to rebuild his life. And then, a miracle happened in 2000. Thomas won the $28 million lottery jackpot. But instead of repeating the mistakes of his Hollywood past, he chose to live a virtuous life to atone for some of his past sins. He became a brilliant philanthropist, a tireless campaigner against drugs, using his wealth and bitter story to save lost souls. On the night of August 1st, 2017, as the clock in Midtown Manhattan ticked near midnight, New York didn't welcome Nathaniel Glover with dazzling stage lights or the thunderous cheers of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Instead, it threw the once thrilling hip-hop empire into a grim scenario that would send shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned screenwriters in Hollywood. In his cheap security guard uniform, the man who had once, alongside Grandmaster Flash, revolutionized the world of music, trudged along, his toolbox apothecary instead of his silver microphone. It was a stark, painful truth. A living legend struggling to earn a living in the heart of a city built on the very beats he had created. Around midnight, as Nathaniel Glover strode down 8th Avenue to his security guard shift, he encountered John Jolly. In the mind of a 57-year-old man already weary of protecting his last shred of self-respect, a casual remark or a glance from Jolly was distorted into a vile threat. Nathaniel believed the homeless man intended to sexually assault him, a grave insult to the former prince of hip-hop. Instead of calling the police, the instincts of a street survivor triggered a brutal reaction. Nathaniel wasn't unarmed. He carried a small knife taped to his forearm, a preparation for the uncertainties of New York's legal jungle. In the dim light, without warning, Nathaniel swung his arm. 2 cold, decisive stabs plunged into Jolly's chest. The metal ripped through flesh, severing the life of a miserable man right there on the dusty sidewalk. The most horrifying thing wasn't the death, but the chilling coldness that followed. Nathaniel Glover calmly left the scene, went straight to work, changed into his security guard uniform, and began his shift as if John Jolly's blood had never stained his hands. He worked nonchalantly, even watching the news about the murder he had just committed, without a trace of emotion. That very nonchalance exposed a cruel reality. For Nathaniel, the life of a homeless person seemed worthless, like a worn-out old beat. But the security cameras captured it all. The velvet curtain of Kid Creole was torn apart not by a rap song, but by cold black-and-white footage. Justice called his name in 2022, sealing the legend's life with a 16-year prison sentence for first-degree manslaughter. Before the judge, Nathaniel was no longer the star of Grandmaster Flash. He was just an aging black man, left behind by societal progress and the harsh realities of time. O.J. Simpson, the king of the juice, with his lightning-fast feet and captivating smile, a Hollywood icon. From the Heisman Award to the iconic Hertz, he was the most brilliant embodiment of the American dream, a hero who broke through all barriers to reign supreme in the hearts of the nation with absolute power and adoration. But all that glory was drowned in a sea of blood on the horrific night of June 12, 1994. In the opulent Brentwood neighborhood, the bodies of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman were found in a gruesome scene. Brutal stab wounds, blood staining the marble walkway, and a deathly silence enveloped the mansion. The image of the moment O.J. Simpson fumbled with the blood-stained leather glove, which seemed to have shrunk and could no longer fit the hands of the accused, became a hauntingly iconic scene. The acquittal came as a shock to the world, but civil justice brought him back down to earth in 1997 with a $33.5 million compensation ruling, solidifying the truth that escaping prison doesn't mean innocence in the eyes of the world. The downfall of The Juice didn't stop there. In a cruel twist of fate, exactly 13 years after the murder, O.J., he once again tore apart his last chance at freedom in Las Vegas. The 2007 armed robbery, a reclaiming of mementos, plunged him into the darkness of a Nevada prison for 9 long years. The 33-year sentence he received then seemed like a belated price the legal system had to pay for what happened at Brentwood years earlier. In the quiet of the cemetery, O.J.'s story remains an unfinished thriller, where the spotlight and the darkness of crime forever intertwine, reminding us of the fragility of a monument when faced with the dark choices of the self.
Leaving the fallen icon behind, we enter a quiet path, where the nightmare hides not on stage, but in ordinary streets.
Arthur Lee Burton entered history as a ghost in Houston's darkest criminal records. He wasn't a star, but his name sowed terror as he transformed a peaceful jogging path into the site of his most heinous crimes, becoming the focal point of a breathtaking legal battle that lasted nearly 3 decades on death row in Texas. Under the dense foliage along Brays Bayou Creek on a 1997 afternoon, a horrific scenario unfolded in blood and brutality. Nancy Adelman, a mother enjoying a peaceful jog, was unaware that each step led her straight into a deadly trap. From the shadows of the jungle, Burton rose, transforming the familiar trail into the scene of a nightmarish tragedy. He lunged at her, dragging the poor mother deep into the thicket, where her screams were silenced by the wildness of nature and the brutality of the killer. There, after committing the heinous sexual assault, Burton chose an even more cruel way to end her life. He pulled a shoelace from her running shoe and strangled her until she was completely lifeless. In that moment, the ordinary shoelace became a cruel death sentence, nailing an innocent woman's life to eternal darkness. The entire bloody scenario was later revealed through Burton's chillingly detailed confession. Although he tried to retract his testimony in court, claiming he was coerced, the gruesome evidence at the scene left him no way out. The first death sentence, handed down in 1998, marked the beginning of one of the most grueling legal journeys in Texas judicial history. For 27 years, Burton's legal team clung to the argument of intellectual disability to delay his execution, but the courts coldly rejected it, as his crimes were too obvious to be excused by any perceived disability. On the morning of August 7, 2024, at Huntsville Prison, the clock of justice struck its final ticks for Arthur Lee Burton. In the thick, deathly atmosphere, the cold poison flowed into his bloodstream, ending the murderer's nearly 3-decade-long escape from punishment. Before closing his eyes, a belated apology escaped his lips, addressed to the family of Nancy Adelman, who had carried the emotional scars of that fateful shoelace for 27 long years. The music of the 1950s would be incomplete without the fiery voice of Little Willie John, who laid the foundation for the legendary careers of James Brown and Al Green. To the American public at the time, he was a symbol of elegance through his addictive tunes like Fever. However, behind that dazzling aura lay a soul consumed by alcohol and uncontrollable rage. Until one day, this charming prince suddenly transformed into a ticking time bomb, waiting for the moment to tear through the veil of fame and plunge his life into darkness. In the fall of 1964, in the cold, rainy city of Seattle, as the lights of the Magic Inn nightclub dimmed, a horrific scenario began to unfold. After an explosive performance, Little Willie John became embroiled in a heated argument with Kendall Roundtree, a complete stranger. In the thick, smoke-filled atmosphere fueled by alcohol, the heated argument quickly escalated into a gruesome scene. There were no special effects or staging, only the cold, steely gleam of a knife swung in the darkness. A fatal stab to Roundtree's chest ended his life, shattering the prince's hopes of returning to glory. Despite his desperate pleas of self-defense, the judge's gavel in 1966 sealed his freedom with a 20-year prison sentence. Little Willie John was sent to the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla, a notorious hell on earth for those who had once lived in luxury. There, his once captivating voice was reduced to a faint echo from the gray stone walls. Fame, once a protective charm, became the target of hatred from the most desperate individuals behind bars. The final chapter in the artist's life closed on May 26, 1968, in the chilling silence of his prison cell, just as he turned 30. Official records stated the young prisoner's cause of death as pneumonia, but dark whispers have persisted in the music community for decades. It is believed that the ill-fated soul was brutally beaten to death by other inmates or even cold-blooded guards, a tragic and mysterious end for a genius who once taught the world how to sing of love. If the music of the 1960s was an earthquake of freedom, then Sly Stone was its most brilliant epicenter. For our generation, this leader was not just a singer. He was a masterful architect who built the soul of the ever-changing funk genre. However, hidden behind his fiery hits, a terrifying scenario of drug addiction had silently taken root, waiting to swallow a genius into the abyss of ruin. His tragedy didn't come from a single gunshot, but from a slow erosion over decades. By the 1980s, his brilliant creativity had given way to a frenzied cocaine addiction. His criminal record now outnumbered his albums, turning the life of a legend into a revolving door with no escape between prison and arrests. People bitterly say that his criminal record photos have now become his new albums. Even in his twilight years, the ghost of the past still haunts this misguided predecessor. In 2011, at the age of 68, instead of being celebrated as a legend, he was arrested for cocaine possession in Los Angeles. To avoid a lengthy prison sentence that could have ended his life behind bars, the aging artist had to accept a rehabilitation agreement, a desperate attempt to salvage the last fragments of a ravaged soul. Is there any greater pain than watching a giant who once revolutionized an entire music culture spend half his life struggling in the vortex of prison and drugs? Sly Stone's case concludes with the lingering regret of a talent crushed. There was a time when El DeBarge's delicate falsetto voice was like honey to the ears of Motown music lovers, and his hit Rhythm of the Night was the most vibrant beat that dispelled the heat of 1980s summer nights. For our generation, El was more than just a star. He was the charming prince who captivated Janet Jackson in a romantic marriage. But if you look back at the dark files stored at the police station, you'll see a truly horrific scenario unfolding behind those eyes that once mesmerized millions. Now there is only emptiness, weariness, and decay. The consequence of a bloody deal with the demon of crack cocaine and the persistent ghosts of mental illness. That mugshot portrait is a testament to an irreversible downfall. Entering the 2000s, luck began to abandon the misguided artist as the charges went beyond mere possession. In 2008, the shackles tightened when El was sentenced to 2 years in prison in California for possession of drugs with intent to distribute, a serious charge that showed how deeply he had fallen into the vortex of drug addiction. Although he spent 13 months behind bars, hoping prison discipline would help him regain his sanity, the price of his freedom in 2010 was only the beginning of a more brutal chapter. In just a few short months, his addiction dragged him back into the abyss, rendering all attempts at rescue by his family and fans meaningless in the cold gaze of law enforcement. By 2012, the same scenario repeated itself, but with even greater violence and madness. No longer the prince of love songs, El DeBarge was escorted away on charges of assault with a deadly weapon, a dark turning point that showed his mental health had been severely damaged. This time, the justice system showed no mercy. He was held in strict custody without bail. In 2014, at the Los Angeles County Jail, a painful and ironic truth emerged. The once illustrious Motown icon was serving his sentence alongside notorious successors like Chris Brown. His appearance in an archival photograph from that period revealed everything. There was no trace of his former glory left, only the face of a complete loser, succumbing to the devastating effects of drugs. James Brown, the godfather of soul, an enduring symbol of power and pride that shaped the soul of world music. Yet behind the title of the hardest working man in showbiz lay a stark reality where even the brightest glory had to bow before the ruthless vortex of deadly hallucinations. The real nightmare began one September afternoon in 1988 in Augusta, Georgia. In a frenzy of angel dust, a hallucinogenic drug, James Brown transformed his office into the scene of a violent horror movie. Wielding a shotgun, the renowned artist stormed into an insurance conference, unleashing utter terror on those present. The situation quickly escalated into a breathtaking high-speed chase. Police were forced to shoot out the tires to stop the deranged pickup truck driven by the Godfather himself. It's chilling to imagine that legend still frantically pressing the gas pedal, steering the car on its screeching metal rims on the asphalt, sparks flying like a bloody action movie scene. That escape was eventually thwarted, but it left an indelible scar on his reputation. The legal consequences came like a scathing indictment. James Brown was convicted of assault and resisting arrest, sentenced to 6 years in prison. The moment the legend stepped into the cell to become prisoner number 1, 55413, caused an immeasurable shock. The image of the emperor stripped of his crown and donned a prisoner's uniform became a grim symbol of the uncompromising nature of justice in the face of the devastating effects of drugs. Although 15 months behind bars and long days of community service ended with a pardon in 1991, the number 1 55413 has been etched into James Brown's legacy like an indelible scar. Freedom may have been restored with a pardon, but the undiminished pride of a legend has been forever left behind the barbed wire fences of that blunder. While some downfalls stem from the impulsiveness of delusion, the story of Ronald Isley, the lead singer of the legendary band, the Isley Brothers, revered by a generation as Mr. Biggs, leads us into a horror scenario with a completely different tone. The cold-blooded calculations hidden behind checks bearing the names of the deceased. For those captivated by his smooth, elegant voice, it's hard to believe that behind the facade of prestige lay a calculated tax evasion scheme targeting the Internal Revenue Service, IRS. However, his greatest glory was completely extinguished, nailed to the dark by a bitter criminal record photograph, where the face of a music mogul was mercilessly stripped bare under the cold, flashing lights of the investigating authorities. What makes Ronald Isley's story chilling and reminiscent of a psychological crime film is his haunting method of concealing income. Federal prosecutors uncovered a shocking truth. To circumvent the law, he ruthlessly used the names of deceased family members to obtain massive royalty checks. This act of retrieving deceased identities for personal gain was not only a large-scale fraud, but also a bitter betrayal of the memories of loved ones, transforming the glory of art into a material ghost lurking in falsified financial statements. Justice finally arrived in 2006, creating a public upheaval. At the age of 65, an age when artists should have enjoyed respect, Ronald Isley found himself in court facing a series of serious tax evasion charges. A prison sentence of over 3 years, along with a massive tax debt of $3.1 million, dealt a devastating blow to the image of a once glamorous veteran. The Mugshot, depicting an elderly man with graying hair and weary eyes, became a painful crossmark on Mr. Biggs' illustrious career, a testament to his misguided decisions driven by the allure of money. For those who had watched the breathtaking sprints of the undefeated Miami Dolphins in 1972, Mercury Morris was a symbol of absolute perfection, a god of the field who had never tasted defeat. Yet, 10 years after that unprecedented feat, the world was shocked to witness the unbeatable star fall prey to the cruel vortex of drugs. All his glory was extinguished by the cold flash of a camera at the Metro-Dade Police Department in August 1982. Replacing his glorious helmet was a haunting criminal record photograph, where the face of a hero was stripped bare, exposed amidst the snares of fate. What made Mercury Morris's case different and dramatic was the twist of fate, the entrapment. In 1982, this man, known for his straightforward personality, was drawn into a fierce police investigation. The cocaine trafficking charges plunged him from the heights of admiration to the depths of ostracism. The mugshot taken at the time captured the face of a genius besieged by the demonic spirit of the stimulant. His eyes held not only fear, but also the shock of someone who had just realized they had become a pawn in a dark game. The horrific 20-year prison sentence struck like a fatal blow, turning the king of the 17-0 season into a solitary convict for 3.5 long years behind bars. However, in the eerie silence of prison, a spectacular reversal occurred. In 1986, the Florida Supreme Court overturned Morris's conviction after uncovering shocking evidence showing he had been framed and received an unfair trial. That dark mugshot from years ago with his simple Boston t-shirt suddenly became evidence of one of the most egregious errors of the justice system. In exchange for his freedom, he accepted a plea deal for a lighter sentence and walked out of the iron gates with a completely different mindset, to dedicate the rest of his life to public speaking, using that same tainted mugshot as a visual tool to warn the younger generation about the devastating power of drugs and the harsh realities of life. Billy Preston, the artist with the gentle smile and magical hands on the keyboard, was the embodiment of the most brilliant melodies, like Nothing from Nothing. For music lovers who lived through the 60s and 70s, he will forever be the fifth member of the Beatles, a genius with a pure soul of gospel music forged in the solemn confines of sacred churches. However, behind that angelic image lay a dark labyrinth of gender identity conflict and a terrifying obsession with drugs, until every soaring note was extinguished by the cold flash of the investigating authorities' cameras. The world was shocked when his criminal record photo, Mugshot, appeared, nailing a legend to the mire of his downfall. Despite attempts to slip through the cracks of the law with plea deals to avoid a long prison sentence, the net of justice finally tightened in 1997. Violations of probation for cocaine possession and a previous insurance fraud case caught up with the legend, sending him to a 3-year federal prison sentence. The second mugshot, darker and more worn out, officially put an end to the reputation of a genius. The harsh days at Avenel State Prison not only robbed him of his freedom, but also permanently damaged his health, leading to exhaustion, kidney failure, and a painful death years later. Looking into the vacant eyes of Stanley Wilson Sr. in the 1999 California State Criminal Archives, one no longer finds the image of the mighty Cincinnati Bengals running machine, but only a shattered soul. The $130,000 theft in Beverly Hills was just the tip of the iceberg. The real brutality lay in the 3-stick rule inscription at the bottom of his record. Past mistakes fueled by drugs had become a tightening noose, transforming a theft charge into a 22-year prison sentence. That mugshot is the most stark lens reflecting a heartbreaking truth. When the spotlight fades, the world doesn't remember the glorious touchdowns. They only remember the prisoner number on your chest. But the darkness doesn't stop there. It's like a virus seeping into the bloodstream of the next generation. Stanley Wilson Jr., the former Detroit Lions player, continued to write his family's history with haunting mugshots. In 2016, he was shot while breaking into a home naked, a sign of extreme mental breakdown. His long series of prison sentences and convictions continued until his death in a psychiatric hospital in 2023, just as the court declared him completely incapacitated. The look in Junior's final profile pictures was no longer that of a warrior, but that of a victim crushed by his father's dark legacy. The haunting image of Stanley Wilson extended to other dark records, from the horrific Pennsylvania stabbing to the gruesome sex trafficking conviction in Florida. Under this name, each mugshot that appeared seemed like a hammer blow to the coffin of a once-admired family, transforming basketball glory into a painful and luxurious memory. In January 1996, Philadelphia was shaken not by a new hit song, but by a tragic gunshot. Cool C, the dazzling star of the Hilltop Hustlers, stepped out of the spotlight to participate in a fateful PNC bank robbery. In the ensuing chaos, as Officer Laretha Baird stepped in to deliver justice, Cool C pulled the trigger. A single bullet claimed the life of a mother of two, and that same bullet ended the career of a genius. The mugshot of Cool C that day presented a stark contrast. No longer a stylish artist, he was now the face of a first-degree murderer. The death sentence slammed shut the door to his freedom. For decades, he has lived on as a ghost in death row, Pennsylvania. Despite facing execution dates multiple times and receiving last-minute postponements, the harsh truth is, Cool C will never see the light of day again. Cool C's record is one of the darkest chapters in the history of rap, where the line between violent lyrics and actual action has been blurred, leaving a legacy of regret and irreparable loss. In July 1991, the world was shaken when the most fearsome man on the planet stepped out of the dazzling spotlight of the boxing ring into the darkness of an Indiana courtroom. Mike Tyson, the youngest heavyweight boxing champion in history, faced charges of raping beauty queen Desiree Washington. The sentence handed down not only resulted in a 3-year prison sentence, but also forced a power icon to bear the shameful label of a sex offender. The mugshot of Tyson at that time became an iconic image of a warrior subdued by the legal system. Looking into the camera, Tyson's eyes held no room for remorse. Instead, they blazed with the anger and resentment of someone who believed he had been framed. Although Tyson always maintained his innocence, the solitude behind bars completely transformed him. It was at the very edge of his freedom that he turned to Islam as his final spiritual refuge. Mike Tyson emerged from prison as a new person, but that profile picture with the fiery gaze remains a major scar in sports history, reminding us of the moment a dynasty was severed by dark secrets of crime. In the dazzling, hallowed halls of the NBA, where stars often strive for perfect morals, Charles Barkley chose a different thorny path. This man from Alabama once shocked the public with his infamous declaration, "I am not a role model." Yet, in 1999, instead of spectacular touchdowns, he committed the most despicable and vile act, hiring someone to murder his pregnant girlfriend, Cherika Adams. The motive for this crime is chilling: avoiding child support. That bullet not only took the life of a young mother, but left a permanent scar on her unborn child. Carruth's mugshot from his arrest doesn't show the resentment of an innocent victim, but the cold, calculated face of someone who meticulously planned his crime. After 18 years of imprisonment at Sampson Correctional Institution, Carruth was released in late 2018. As of January 2026, at age 52, he lives a secluded life in the shadow of public contempt. While Carruth tries to erase his past, his son, Chancellor Adams, still battles cerebral palsy, a devastating consequence of the attack. The 1999 profile picture remains, a reminder of how the glamour of an NFL star can mask a dark heart. In NFL history, the name Ray Carruth doesn't evoke glorious touchdowns, but rather the embodiment of profound disgust, as his criminal record photo marked the end of a soul corrupted by selfishness. Born in 1974 in Sacramento, Carruth was once the great hope of the Carolina Panthers, a promising winger with a bright future. However, in 1999, the entire nation was shocked when the harsh truth was revealed. In a despicable attempt to evade alimony, Carruth hired someone to murder his pregnant girlfriend, Cherika Adams. The mugshot from that year captured a cold, emotionless face, reflecting the cruel heart of someone willing to use blood to solve his personal financial burdens. The conspiracy to commit murder ended Carruth's career with 18 years behind the bars of Sampson Correctional Institution. When he walked out of prison in October 2018, the man had lost everything, from his reputation to the minimum respect of society. By early 2026, at age 52, Carruth chose a life of seclusion, avoiding the media spotlight as a way to cover up the indelible stain on his record. However, the shadow of his crime still lingers in the form of Chancellor Adams, his son. The boy miraculously survived the attack, but suffered permanent cerebral palsy, a painful testament to his father's brutality. Looking at Carruth's profile picture, we don't see a fallen athlete, but a complete breakdown of human dignity, where meager alimony dollars are valued more highly than the lives of the woman he loves and his unborn child. In the modern hip-hop world, Tory Lanez's name was once a symbol of talent and resounding success. However, on that fateful night in 2020 in Hollywood Hills, the spotlights were replaced by the flashing lights of police. Daystar Peterson, the rapper's real name, destroyed his own career when he shot rapper Megan Thee Stallion in the leg after an argument fueled by alcohol and an inflated ego. The case was not just a typical act of violence, it became a deep rift, shaking the community regarding the protection of black women. In 2023, the court sentenced Lanez to 10 years in prison on 3 felony charges, including assault with a semi-automatic weapon. His mugshot as he entered the California State Prison showed a look that was both stunned and defiant, a stark contrast to the glamorous image he projected in his million-view music videos. By January 2026, at age 33, instead of performing on grand stages, Tory Lanez is facing the cold, hard walls of a prison cell. His career stalled, his reputation tarnished. He has become a grim reminder that no matter how brilliant a star you are, a moment of impulsiveness and lack of self-control can turn glory to ashes. That criminal record photo is now the only remaining legacy of a genius who chose the wrong path. In the sanctuary of traditional family values, Bill Cosby once stood at the pinnacle as America's father. However, that glorious legacy shattered when dozens of women emerged from the shadows, exposing a horrifying truth that had lasted for decades. The collapse of a legend is starkly encapsulated in 2 criminal record photos documenting the tumultuous final days of his life. The first photo, from 2018, carries the weight of a classic downfall. Immediately after receiving his sentence for sexual assault, the man who had always held his head high now appears with a heavy gaze fixed on the ground. He avoids the camera as if the weight of public backlash has stripped him of his star power. It was the moment his title of exemplary father was officially replaced by prisoner number N7687, shocking an entire generation. 2 years later, amidst the 2020 pandemic, another profile picture shocked the public. At age 83, Cosby appeared with a mask dangling from his chin and a subtle, enigmatic smile. This image created a cruel irony, no longer the submissive demeanor of the past, but instead evoking the arrogance of someone who believed the cycle of fate was far from over. Despite being released in 2021 due to procedural errors, Bill Cosby, at age 88, still had to live his final days in the shadow of new civil lawsuits. Looking at the contrast between the resentful profile picture and the strange smile behind the mask, one might shudder to wonder if society was too naive to place its trust in an image molded by the media, inadvertently creating a perfect shield for crimes hidden for half a century. How many cries for help have been drowned out by the frenzied applause, leaving behind only sorrow for those talented individuals who have forever lost themselves? These grim profile pictures reveal a bitter reality. A society consumed by glamour, neglecting souls shattered in their own darkness by the pressure of perfection and the weight of expectations for an ideal model that doesn't exist. Thank you for joining us on this emotionally charged journey. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next stories delving into the shadows hidden behind the Hollywood lights.